folks, and welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Oh, what's going on over there with the old Ukraine? It looks to me like what we're seeing is basically all that's going on is just a smokescreen for them to deliver weapons and cocaine all over the shop. It's not good. There's been a plane crash. A plane crash in Greece. Okay? And white powder everywhere. And apparently, all those that were stood around there trying to deal with it had really, really numb lips. Now, what could that be? I wonder. Cocaine does that, doesn't it? Doesn't it not just make your lips and your gob and your face go numb? So it looks like they're shipping out all sorts of nonsense from Ukraine. It's just a cover. The whole thing's a blag. It's a show. The whole thing. You know, Putin is a tosser. Biden, we know, is a tosser. I mean, you see Biden, you're looking at Jesuit. You're looking at Rome. You see Putin, you're looking at Rome. Of course, we're to see Israel, because Israel is Rome. What is Rome? Well, it's not Rome as we used to know it. It's Babylon. It's the Babylons. Took over everything. It's a shit show. And they're using it to sell arms. So basically, all these arms everybody's sending, you know, baby boomers, go, let's send all that, get some arms over there, let's get them cracking up. And then you've got idiot soldiers over here going, let's go over there. Have you any idea how many have been killed? How many people have been killed so far? It's ridiculous. I mean, if ever you set up something just to kill soldiers, this is it. And basically, all this money you're sending, etc., it's just a weapons sale. They're arming ISIS, ISIL. Every two-bit terrorist organisation around the world is getting a piece of all our aid. Well, I say our, I wouldn't give them steam off my shit. Let's be honest, it's not ours, it's yours, if you've done it. You know, you've got UN begging for money, as usual, for Turkey. Well, if you're going to give money to Red Cross or any of these operations, let's just let you know that they're going to traffic all the children, all the adults. Indentured servants, sending them all over the show to help undermine your nation. That's what's happening. That's got me banned on Facebook till the day. Of course, they didn't ban me for that because they didn't want anybody to get excited about it. They banned me for saying, well, actually, I'll have to tell you a bit of a story, but one young lass on the Facebook put up this image of a woman who'd farted and was traumatised because her husband wouldn't forgive her. So I, of course, just in the spirit of fun, just put stoner. And Facebook kicked it off. Oh, that goes against our policy. You're banned for 30 days. Of course, it was nothing to do with that, because I've been badgering everybody on Facebook for about 6 hours before, because I was bored. Because I was bored and I've stopped smoking weed. So that's not a good idea. I tend to cause havoc when I'm not on that stuff. So this might get interesting tonight, because I'm rather full of excitement and energy. And feel sick because I'm smoking too many fags. Because I'm trying to get that taste back and it's not happening. I'm just smoking fag after fag after fag and I might die by the end of the day. Lung cancer, but never mind. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there who'll be happy if I die. Lung cancer tomorrow. Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to do. So never mind that. But this garbage that's going on over there. So planes crashed. There's weapons in there. It was loaded up in Serbia. So these are weapons that were loaded up in Serbia en route to Bangladesh. What does Bangladesh want weapons for? And cocaine. But of course it was stopping off first at in Syria and Yemen. So they're drug dealing. They're drug dealing and weapon selling in the background, and we only know about it because it crashed in Greece. Everybody that's there, the lips are all numb. I mean, come on people. Stop sending your money to the shit show. Stop encouraging governments to send weapons. You know, you've got the Hindu ninja running around again with this psycho Polish aristocrat Zelensky. You know, he's on the tour again, in and out. And every time he comes around, it's costing you money. It's costing you your sons and your dads. Get a grip, folks, will you? This is a shit show. It's not good. They're all full of shit. They're all working for the same priesthood. See it. It's a smokescreen. It's a load of shit. And what they're trying to do is encourage US and idiot, this cabinet that we've got here, they want all our boys over there getting slaughtered while all these UN operatives have been coming out here on these boats. They've signed the Official Secrets Act, they've been training Turkey, they've been training Ukraine, ready for the UN, which is Rome, again, to set up checkpoints on these 15-minute cities that they're setting up down in the south. Of course, it's always in the south, because the south is full of numpties. We know this. Anyway, we don't need to know, because I'm just pretend to be a northerner, and that's it. The Scousers, of course, in response to me making it clear over the last year that they can no longer consider themselves northerners because they bent over backwards for the old fantasy that we've just experienced for 3 years, I've got rather excited. We've got rather excited because there was a hotel down in there in the old Liverpool where 2 people, male and a female, out of one particular hotel that's housing all these funny folk, who were trying to steal children. Scouse children! Yeah. So the Scouts got excited, they were protesting over the weekend. I don't know whether they're carrying on, because there appears to be a media blackout on the matter. And of course the Scousers want rid of these people that are lurking around trying to nick the kids. And I think that's a good thing. So, hooray for the Scousers, you are back on the path to be calling yourselves Northerners. So good. Well done the Scouts, because I've always loved the Scousers, and I always get on with the Scousers, but obviously you do seem to have lost their ability to protest. So I'm glad that's back on. That's got to be good. But you know, this plane, it's been sanctioned by Biden's bunch, which of course is Rome, and a Serbian arms dealer that they're using, because all he has to do is change the LCC number of his company, because of course he's banned from anybody doing business with, but if he changes the LCC number of his company, that's right, they're off and they're away. So this is how they're doing it. This is the game they're playing. It's a drugs and arms fest, basically. And it's a great way that Rome can arm all its terrorists all across the world, just as Biden did in Afghanistan by leaving billions and billions of pounds of hardware there for them to get excited with. So, you know, if you're not seeing this show now for what it is, you know, there's not much hope for you, is there? Really. You know, there's not much hope for you at all. And you're actually causing problems for real guys around here. You know, real awake people, boys and girls that know what crack is, and they're not very happy about it. You know, most of you wallowing in misery because of your own actions in the last 3 years. But that's got nothing to do with the likes of me. That's on you. That's it. That's it. It's on you. So we don't care about it anymore. Simple as that. All you're going to do is scream for more aid to Ukraine. What use are you, actually, apart from pulling this nation further and further into debt, into war? Because, of course, you're not going to war, are you not? No. It's your sons. You're not going to go. You're the ones that scream the loudest, and always the ones that never go, and no intention of going, and shit yourself at the thought. So, not good. I don't like it. It needs to be sorted out. New people need to get a grip. So, anyway. Getting a bit excited, you can tell. I'm going to have to rethink this magic cabbage situation. I'm telling you now, it might not be a good idea. Anyway, who's on? Paul says, good evening, Sean and everybody. Good evening to you, Paul. Slipknot says, alright, Sean, alright, everyone. Hey, Trev. And he's got a pink image up there now. What's happening to you, Trev? I've been going to these rainbow concerts and all that, not like you, have you? God says, hello, boss and chat, and he's got an emoji with a big tongue hanging out. Okay, Anita says, nice, sir. Well, thank you very kindly. PY says, evening all. Evening, Paul. Jeff says, good evening, Sean. One and all, and a little Sean. Back at the Wise Asylum, it must be Sunday. It is Sunday, Sunday sermon from the Wise Asylum, because 1973, and that looks like a pile of dog shit. Interesting. And we got the last pillar says, hello everyone. Hello, brother Sean. Well, hello to you. Jeff says, Mew is on the pot, stoned off his tits. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to consider this magic cabbage situation because I'm just getting a little bit too excited. I've been running around all day today and I'm just... I could cause a revolution while I'm like this, you know what I'm saying? It's not good. So the magic cabbage might have to become another part of my world again. I don't know. Anyway, let's have a look. Untitled says, hello, Sean, and to all popcorn on board. Good stuff. Yep, that's always a good idea. Get your beverage out, sit down, and you can listen to my madness. It's got to be good. Jeff again says, I believe the Ukraine people have been undercutting the Scouser on selling the green. Have they really? That's disgusting. Is that why the Scousers got excited? There's a shortage of the old magic cabbage. Well, well. James Stephen Emery says, divorce mistress Queen of England. Well, yes. And we're going to talk about that today because I don't think people actually realise what's going on. You know, we've got big ears. Old big ears there, declaring himself protector of the Church of Scotland and the King of Scotland. No side of England. Why? Well, of course he can't be King of England because he's married to a divorcee. We had an abdication on just that matter not that long ago. John M says evening, Sean, and we've got an emoji with sunglasses on. Okay, good evening to you, sir. Right, to business. Let's have a little look at what we're going on here. Now then, let's just remind ourselves of something, shall we? He's not a king. He can't take regal power until you take the correct coronation oath, which this guy's no intention of taking whatsoever, because he can't. Just like his mummy and just like his granddad. Because all three, well, the two already, they didn't take the correct oath, they fannied about. Which is why England's been going down the sewer since. Baby boomers didn't give a shit, they were too busy taking drugs, LSD, dancing, giggling, retiring, selling out the nation, and now look what's happened to them. You've been paid for it. Look what you've been paid for all your efforts, dossing. It's not good, folks. So here we go. A reminder of who we're dealing with here. There he is, in all his glory, getting his orders. That's what's going on. And that guy on the right, well, he's been in control of the last one. Yeah, as well. Although, they didn't want to show that. They're happy to show this. Because they just want to besmirch everything England. They're no interest in England anymore. Because England is the place of freedom. It always has been. And we're going to examine that now. Because I don't want you to take my word for it. I know I'm fantastic and amazing. But you need to get to grips with what's actually going on here. Because England is going to die. Because nobody gives a shit. Nobody. Everybody wants to be in the UK corporation because it's bankrupt. Everybody wants to be looked after. Everybody wants something off the state. You know what I mean? I mean, these kids today, what? We've got a generation that all they've grown up with is mum and dad going to cash machine for no effort. Call the dole. Innit? Oh, universal credit now. Credit. Why is everybody getting credit? What's happened to earning? Well, does nobody want to earn anymore? Uncle John Craven, all it says, will I am. Well, that's another one, isn't it? You know, I mean, you've got to understand this game. He wants to sod England, get up into Scotland, and yet he's a Duke of Lancaster. And that's a fiefdom all on its own. They nicked it. They nicked it. He's Duke of Lancaster now, all of a sudden. And his little son is milking Cornwall. So, you know, it's one thing. If you want to go off to Scotland, piss off. We don't care. If you want to be an Aggie squeezer, off you go. We don't care. But your audacity to want to nick Lancashire, that's my territory, and keep all the Cornwall, it's not on. That's disgusting. It's not acceptable in my book. End of story. Which is why, when I interviewed Ivan, I made it clear, that's fine if you want to come on, matey, because I'm looking at everything at the moment and he's the best bet. You get on there, mate, you give me Lancaster. That's good. In fact, you can give me the whole north, if you like, and we'll sort this shit out between us. Anyway, that aside, let's get into some groovy stuff. Well, actually, it's not very groovy stuff, it's disgusting. But it is what's going down. So, you know, I want everybody to just remember. Yep. Where are we? So here we go. Where is it? Oh, is it gone? Here we go. So going back to 1936, Okay, so this is before the Second World War. Of course, all the leaders in the world, in Europe, were all going to visit Hitler. So there were all sorts of nonsense going on. Because, of course, Hitler was a product of the inner city of London, funded by it through Wall Street, Boeing, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, GEC, Northrop Grumman, all these mammoth corporations that they set up before the First World War, after the reset from 1850 to 1900, funded the Third Reich. Now, why would they do that? Why were it so important to these people that everybody hated Germany? Well, I'll tell you. It's very recent, i.e. this week, that I've come to realise and understand fully why they needed the world to hate the Germans, who have always been a great race. You see, the simple fact is, Germany, the language, is what will undo the Babylonian priesthood's bullshit. This is what they've done it for. This is why they've had the entire European landmass, England, America, etc., the whole world despised Germany, and why they destroyed it. Because the German language undermines the shit language called English, which is a bastard language, so they can obfuscate everything and create this legal system that they've got going on everywhere, which has bedazzled everybody out there, including lawyers, including judges, including everybody. The reason being English language does that, it allows for that. But the German language is specific. And if we were to start to understand the German language, but not only that, the Germans started to understand their own language, the keys to the scam, the keys to the blag, come from the German language itself. And this is why they've done all this. This is why they've demolished Germany in 2 world wars. Well, 1 world war, the Second World War especially. The First World War was to destroy England, which it did very well by killing all our boys. Yeah, all the influx of all the pogrom people from 1888 to 1915 ended only by an act of parliament, gave them the ability to take over the Masonic lodges, kill all our men, boom, boom, there you go. Kitchener changed the mandate of Freemasonry, which was to ensure the rightful king was on the throne, and thus uphold England, was changed to uphold the then coming Israel. It's just so clear to me now why they had to destroy Germany. And it's not for what the baby boomers believe, because the baby boomers don't know their ass from their elbow. Neither did their parents. Because, of course, the state of the nation at the pre-World War I had to shows itself clearly. The entire nation of males here were stupid enough to believe that it was a good idea to go and kill the German, when in fact, by the end of the first year of that war in 1914, they'd slaughtered millions of English. Why? Because the English soldiers were being told what to do by commanders that weren't English. And they were told to get out their little trench and jump out there and allow themselves to be shot to shit by the Germans. So, there you go. This is what they've done. This is what's been happening while everybody's been tossing about, pissing about, dancing to jazz, as it were back then, on into rock and roll, LSD, blah, 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 blah. That's it. You've all been completely and utterly watching the shadows on the wall. Yeah. Nobody's been looking at the fire. So, basically, after ruling for less than 1 year, Edward VIII becomes the first English monarch to voluntarily abdicate the throne. He chose to abdicate after the British government, the public, and the Church of England condemned his decision to marry the American divorcee, Wallace Warfield Simpson, who, of course, it's been said was a hermaphrodite, and they reckon Eddie were into that stuff. I don't believe it for a second, to be quite honest. I think they had to break this chain so that they get this black girls in, which are Saxe-Coburg Gotha, to replace the Hanoverians. So when you're looking at the Saxe-Coburgs, and of course the Coburg is the key to that family. The Coburgs are an immense power. And they're not, okay, they might hail from Germany, but you've got to remember, the Prussians, the warlords, took over all of Germany, and Russia, and the Balkans, and put the lot on our throne way back in the 1700s. The Prussians, a war machine. That's what's going on, that's what's happened. So all these little shenanigans, but just take that on board. A king abdicated because he was marrying a divorcee. Why is that different for this guy? Why is it any different for this fella who's married to a divorcee? And why is our government or cabinet, it's not a government, it's just a cabinet, why are they not crying their eyeballs out? Why? Why are they not crying their eyeballs out? Well, it's pretty simple. Because this guy on the right is the guy that's running all this stuff. Or whomever, you know, because they talk about a bit so we can't always see it. But there you go. The Red Shield, Rome, Jesuit, Babylon. There you go. That's why they're not doing anything about it. Because this bunch also control the Privy Council. So thus, they control the cabinet. And every little MP you've got out there are pretty shit. They're useless. They're self-absorbed, self-aggrandized power trippers. They know nothing about England. They know nothing about history. They're just serving the self. And you, the hapless population, do nothing. Because, of course, Coronation Street's on 3 times a week. Far more important than what the hell's going on Blighty. So I'm disgusted. It's pretty simple. I'm absolutely disgusted. So there you go. American divorcee. You're not allowed. Get off the throne. Abdicate. Go away. That's what usually happens. What's happened today? What's actually happened? Because I don't know. Let's have a look at this. Because what we need to do is try and see the picture. As difficult as it is, but there is a picture to be seen. And we're going to attempt to present that picture tonight. So, HM Government, Sovereign Grant Act 2011. Report of the Royal Trustees on the Sovereign Grant Review 2016. Royal Trustees. Who are them? Because they're in charge of all this shindig. Okay? Sovereign Grant Act 2011, report of the Royal Trustees on the Sovereign Grant Review 2016, presented to Parliament pursuant to Section 7(4) of the Sovereign Grant Act of 2011. Did you even know that existed? Did you, folk? You had no idea of it. Because the Queen didn't tell you. Queen carried on going, oh, and you're all going, oh, she's beautiful. No, she's not. And she never was. Let's have a look. Now, this is another one I want you to get to. Is Crown copyright. Everybody goes, we can't use it because it's Crown. Well, who the fucking hell do you think the Crown is? It's you. The people. Because you give the office of monarch its sovereignty. Crown copyright means you own it. It's yours. Okay? So it says, you may yeah, I fucking know I can reuse it, pal. It's mine. Alright? And I don't need to ask permission from you. So, what we're going to get just from here, I just want to show that this is all about basically how 1760 George III, who were Roman, married to a Roman law girl, so George III were pushing Rome in here, agreed to surrender the net income of the Crown Estate to Exchequer. So he surrendered the income of the Crown Estate to Parliament. Who knows Parliament? Privy Council. Who knows Privy Council? Rothschild. Billionaires! Yep. Historically, this sport was provided in 4 parts. Civil lists which were provided to meet the official expenses of the royal household, and separate grants in aid to meet the cost of royal travel, royal communications and information of the maintenance of the occupied royal place in England and Wales. So look here. Oh, my screen's too large, it says. Okay. So can't you see it? Okay. There's not much I can do about that because it's... Anyway. What only thing I'm trying to get across here is who are these trustees? Because it's important that we start to understand just what's really going on here. Yeah, I know, Frank, there's not much I can do on this one, my old channel, but thanks for letting me know. So we're not really reading much of this. I just want to show you who these trustees are. So, let's see what a bit. Right, so this is 2016. The Prime Minister, who today is the Hindu ninja. Philip Hammond, so that's the Chancellor, which is Jeremy the Hunt. And this fella, Sir Alan Reid. And he still is today. So who's he? Right, so I don't know whether you can see that or not. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do, just in case. Can you see it now? So the three trustees in question is the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Sir Alan Reid. Of course, it's not Theresa May today. It's the Hindu ninja, and it's Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor. But Alan Reid is still in the seat. Now, Alan Reid is... Wait a minute. The Duchy Council. So this is the Duchy of Lancaster. So he's off out to tighten up to Scotland, wants to be King of Scotland, no mention of England, because of course he can't take the coronation oath because he's married a divorcee. How lucky is that? But of course, if you let this go on, that means there is no England, there's no Magna Carta, which is what we're going to look at in a minute. Okay, so the Duchy Council. Council responsibility to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and the Chancellor to the Sovereign for the Duchy's affairs. Appointments to the Council are made by the King on the recommendation of the Chancellor. Now remember, the Privy Council represents the absent King. So we haven't got a king. They keep calling him a king. He isn't a king. He can't take regal power until you take the coronation oath. He's not going to take the coronation oath. Therefore, he cannot be king. End of. Not because I say so. This is the rules of the game. This is what they're obfuscating. The council meets 5 times a year. Members of the council include 2 ex officio appointments. The Receiver General of the Duchy, who is the keeper of the Privy Purse, and the Clerk of the Council, who is also the Chief Executive Officer of the Duchy of Lancaster, or the council members are chosen for their particular business skills or for their links to the County Palatine. The Chancellor appoints 1 member of the council to act as the chairman of the council. There you go. Sir Alan Reid. Right? So these are the trustees. This is how now they've took over our office of monarch. This is how you've got to look at this. It's the 3 Musketeers, right, have took over. These people are running our office of monarch in the cabinet, which means the Privy Council, not the monarch. It has been so since we last had a king. Okay? George VI wasn't the king. He did the same as his daughter. He didn't do the correct coronation oath. This is why we've been undone for such a long time. Because our ancestors, our older generations, weren't paying attention. This is how it works, okay? So this is what's going on. The 3 amigos. So then you've got Sir Michael Stevens, KCVO, Receiver General. Miss Sonia Tullaney, KC Attorney General. Mr Nathan Thompson. Mr Hugh Bullock. Lord Downshire. Miss Jill May. Miss Lucy MacDonald. Mr Alistair Martin. And Mr Alistair Elliott. Don't know who they are. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is responsible to the Sovereign for the... Well, we've looked at that. We've always said appointment for the Royal Chancellor is made by His Majesty. He's not His Majesty. Because he's not the King. Can you see how they're obfuscating everything and you suck it up? And the reason why they can get away with this now is because they've watched you suck it up for the last 3 years. They know the majority of people in this nation are beyond stupid. They're beyond retarded. You know? The executive. That fella, and that fella. Yeah? Nathan Thompson, Stuart McGarrity, Hugh Bourgeois. Treason. Whoever they are, I don't care who you are. Treason. London office. Oh. Adrian Bayliss. Naomi Brown. Hugh Bruce Watt. Hugo Bucknam. Richard Buck. Alexander Carr. Graham Chalk. Marcel Dismilly. What a stupid name that is. Katie Linfrith. Michelle Masson. Stuart McGarrity. George Petrides. Mary Lou Pickett. Zoe Room. Archie Rose. Nathan Thompson. Julie Townsend. Katie Warden. Claire Wesley. Cyan West. And here we have a Reverend. Canon Thomas Woodhouse. Chaplain, the Queen's Chapel of the Savoy. What kind of car do you drive, pal? Because I bet Jesus wouldn't sanction it. Anyway, where were we? Where's it gone? Oh, we've lost it. There we go. Lancaster office. Laura Ayrton, Sally Davis, Debbie Garrity, Dora Hunter Blair, Vicky Matthews, Lydia Richards, Mary Roscoe, Laura Thompson, Julie Webster, Tom Wells, Ralph Whitehead. Anybody in Lancaster interact with these people and just explain to them that they're completely fruit bat and they don't know their ass from their elbow. Our partners. Get this. BDP, Bidwells, Bluer Homes, Coots, Eversheds. How many of you love that Eversheds? Fairbrother, Ferrier & Co, Foresters, or Forsters, Forwoods, Forestry and Woodland Consultancy. So this, they're nicking it. They're nicking everything. They're the ones nicking your land and putting forests up for zero carbon emission. Francis Jackson Holmes. So this is how they're nicking your land. It's this bunch of tossers. Gerald Eve, Harper Dennis Hobbs, Hartnell Taylor Cook, JLL, Knight Frank, Newton Investment Management, North Bank, Orms, Courts, and Safri Champness. The Duchy of Lancaster, 1 Lancaster Place, Strand, London. WC2E 7ED. Contact us. I might do. So there we go. Dutch Asia of Lancaster, now as we know as Duchy of Lancaster, began in 1265 when Henry III gifted the baronial lands of Simon de Montfort because they nicked it off Simon de Montfort. So it's a thief. It's a fiefdom. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'll put this up after so you can all have a good look at this nonsense. Reign of Queen Victoria. So, there's your three amigos. Reed's operating for the Duchy of Lancaster. Charlie Boy now claims to be the Duke of Lancaster, well off up into Agis squeezing territory. What do you think of that? So you've got to start looking at this picture and how it really is. Now, I want to have a look at this. This is George Cork, Resurrection of the Magna Carta. So, this is what he had to say about why it's so important that we understand that Scotland isn't England and England isn't Scotland. And of course, let me just put this straight. I love you jocks. I've never met a jock I don't like. Yeah, they're great people. We're not talking about Scottish people. We're talking about the hoity toits that run England from Scotland because that's where they all live. And it has been so since David I. You know? So he has this to say. So you need to get a grip of why it's important that we understand that there's a major difference. It says, they were, in other words, intended for a wide lay as well as a legally learned audience. Their account of the history of English law was intended to shore up that law, and therefore the liberties which were considered to be grounded in it, first against James I's early threats of union between his English and Scottish kingdoms, including a union of the respective legal systems of those two kingdoms. Right, so James I, they were all frightened to death because he was trying to do exactly what Charles is doing, but he's not doing this. He's not trying to put them together. He's trying to get rid of England. That's what he's doing. As King of the UK, King of Scotland, but not England. Right? So this is what we're going on to James I's time. This is why the English weren't happy. The consequence of such a legal union was widely accepted to be the abolition of English common law and the liberties that English law was deemed to embody. Second, and more broadly, even as the threat of the union between England and Scotland receded, Court was seen to forestall the new king's various devious attempts to sidestep Parliament. So this is why Cromwell, the Jesuit-trained merchant puppet, or rather puppet of George Monk, who was an avid Jesuit and hated everything Dutch. Yet, I mean, there's so smoke and mirrors in all this stuff, you know. If George Monk said no, if George Monk had represented England, Cromwell wouldn't have got a look in. Cromwell was George Monk's bitch. And George Monk, to make it look like he was all over everywhere bar where he needed to be. In the preface to the Eight Reports, published in 1611, Court presented the Magna Carta of 1225 as the first surviving written summary of English law in statutory form. There was nothing novel or unconventional about this. It was in accord with English legal tradition, reaching back to the late 13th century. But Corky greatly elaborated it. He knew that Henry III's charter was a confirmation of John's 1215 Magna Carta. Yeah, so they were pushing it, and Henry III actually, because there's a lot of talking. Oh, no, it got repealed. They were all this. Pope said no. Blah 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 blah. No, Henry III actually re-cemented the 1215. And we also have to remember that James and Charles were actually, they were both Freemasons, they were both Protestant. They were actually trying to prevent Rome from getting in. So there's so much smoke and mirrors, even in the historical records. And I'd say made so that we can't really get to grips with what were actually going on in the 1600s. He knew that Henry III's charge was a confirmation of John's 1215, and the text of which he had not yet bothered to try to excavate, because that was not what was in the statute book, and he traced the tradition of the Royal Charter of Liberties granted to the King's subjects back through Henry II's coronation charter in 1154, Stephen's coronation charter in 1135, and Henry I's coronation charter in 1100 to William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror had not issued a coronation charter, but according to some 13th and 14th century chroniclers and a 12th century apocryphal law code which Coke accepted as authentic, the first Norman king had summoned an assembly of the English nobility which had summarised existing, indeed immemorial English law, labelled as the laws of King Edward. The label meant not that these laws were Edward the Confessor's own legislation, rather they were the existing English laws which Edward the Confessor had endorsed, and which William the Conqueror, in the wake of his conquest of England, was in turn confirming. So we've discussed before how Alfred basically, on command of his aldermen, cemented the existing laws of these islands in his idea of England. That's what was going on. So there was nothing new being created under Alfred. And a lot of that stuff were pulled together and kept in force by Offa, the only king in his day that operated on equal terms with Charlemagne. Every other monarch in Europe was under Charlemagne. Offa wasn't. Offa on equal terms, he weren't having it. And that's how it went. Offa were a good guy. So were Alfred, in my opinion. But what they were doing, they weren't inventing laws, creating anything new. They were pulling in what was already England. So what you can get from that is that the Magna Carta itself was but the old and ancient customs of England. And this is why it's so important. And as we discussed last week with the video that I put up, we need to start to recognise that the Magna Carta is English custom because it's not a parliamentary law. It's not an act. It's not an act that can be repealed, changed or altered by either the king or Parliament. And remember, at this time we had Oxford? The Parliament of the day was the provisions of Oxford, and that was made up of the barons. So when they talk about Parliament back in those days, they're not talking about this bunch of shitheads that we've got like this now, which is party politics. It wasn't party politics back in them days, and we're going to have a look at that in a minute. It says Henry III's Charter of 1225 was simply the first statutory exemplification of the ancient, indeed immemorial English law. And that indeed was embodied in the Norman conquest in successive Magna Carta issued by successive kings. So you can see that the Magna Carta isn't what these bunch of Johnny-come-latelys try and pretend it is. They've done everything to obfuscate it. I mean, the Queen even celebrated it, its 800th celebration in 2015. But I've been looking today to try and find the precepts on how that England cannot be put under a foreign power. Can you find it? I mean, I've looked through all my documents I've done on Magna Carta in the past, and I can't find it. So they've removed it. They've moved it, edit, whatever. But really what it's saying this is that the actual 2015 Magna Carta cannot be repealed, no matter what they do and how they obfuscate and hide it. It stands, it's in force, but the problem is nobody is breathing life into it. That's on us. That is on us. And it also has, it shows you what you have to do if you have foreigners on the land that are not operating according to English law, which of course isn't parliamentary policy, which is all these immigrants that we've got in the country today. They're operating contrary to law. Now, when it comes to Islam, they need to get a grip here because the Quran's very clear. They have to be obeying the laws of the nation they're in. It doesn't matter if they don't know what them laws are. That's because they've failed to seek knowledge, which is another command of the Quran. And on the back of that, the Quran tells them that if they're not obeying those two precepts and others, they can't call themselves Muslims. They are kafir. It's important that people start to realise these concepts because the Babylonian priestess has got us all running around on ignorance. We don't have a clue from his arse from his elbow. And this is how they're managing to take over all nations. Obfuscating everything because they've got the shit show going on in Ukraine while they sell drugs and weapons to all their gangster-related clans, terrorists, etc. across the world. So if they're arming them now, then they're intending to use them in the future to start to cause havoc all over the show. We've got the UN guys coming in on these boats, yeah? Soldiers. It's what they are. And the plan is to get our boys off into this Ukraine garbage and put up these 15-minute cities with UN soldiers marking them. It's not good, people. It's not good. And we need to start to get a grip of this game. Sinister convergence of Klaus Schwab's Great Reset with the Vatican and liberation theology. Liberation theology is Jesuit theology. That's what it is. Remember, the Jesuits today are not the Jesuits of old. They're Prussian Jesuits. They were kicked out of the Vatican, took up by Catherine the Great in Russia and Corsica, and then were forced back in to the Vatican after Napoleon had done his thing, and then could stand down because, of course, they'd killed all the monarchies, ready for Queen Victoria's offspring to be thrust across Europe in the monarchies, and here we are today. So liberation theory and Vatican theory, which is Jesuit theology after Vatican II, is the World Economic Forum. That's what it is. Yeah? That is what it is. Again, I'll put this up there. We don't need to go through that. But this is the game. Elder Kamawara was an intimate figure in the movement that soon spread worldwide, not only in the Catholic Church, but among other churches as well. It was later called liberation theology. But it wasn't set about Catholic churches. Here, in Europe, it was done over in South America, who didn't know their ass from their elbow. So what did they know about whether this were different to original church doctrine? They didn't have a clue. This is how they've managed to get all this together. So there you go. Pope Francis is involved. Great Reset. There you go. World Economic Forum. Liberation theology. Pure Jesuit theology. What else did I have here? Okay, so we're gonna nip off that. I think it's on here. Did that make sense? Can you see that what they call parliamentary acts are not English law? It's not. It's not English custom. It's not English law. It's parliamentary, legislative law. Now, William and Mary did their very best to get us away again from Rome, this Prussian shit. But Anne undid it with the Act of Union. But they did their very best. The unfortunate thing is, they're Acts of Parliament. However, the intent of William and Mary was based in the Magna Carta. That's what they were trying to re-establish in parliamentary acts. So your Bill of Rights, Coronation Oath, or the Claim of Rights. So William and Mary were amazing. They were an amazing couple. They really were. And they did us a lot of good. And all that William did, but it took a while before Mary could convince William to what needed to be done. And then Anne undid it. But of course, Anne was completely controlled by Sarah Churchill, the very family, the Dukes of Marlborough, that actually took the carrot and allowed the influx of the merchants for the Civil War. It was the Dukes of Marlborough that facilitated that. Now then, so did you get that? Is that making sense to you? Off the stress relief. Well, this is just me. This is me normal. I just can't keep still. Full of energy, full of beans. I've got a lot to say. So I think I might have to revisit the magic cabbage, because of course it does keep things nice and pleasant, and it keeps me chilled out. Because it's just getting more and more worse. I'm getting more and more energised, and basically take over the world. You know what I'm saying? If I had a nice standing army with me, we would definitely be down in Parliament. A bit of Cromwell kind of thing, you know, that's how it'd go. Divorce Mr. Square, well, we got to that, didn't we? Jeff says Treen may have something to say about that, Sean. Treen's a lovely girl. She's an aggie squeezer, but she's a lovely girl. And like I said, I'm not talking, this is not against Scottish people. I've never met a jock I don't like. Seriously. I mean, I get on with jocks, all the jocks. I get on with scousers. But of course they were naughty. But it looks like they're redeeming themselves, which is good. Greeting says, join the dots, Lone Rage, absolutely zoom out. Couldn't do it, sorry guys. It didn't give me the... But I will put the documents up. Everything I put on here, I'll always put a link to the documents for you, so you can actually, you know, if there's interesting parts of it that you want to pursue, you can do so. But obviously I want to give it my narrative, so that you can connect the dots with it all, you know. So the link will go up, you don't worry about that. Jeff Barber follows Towns. But Andrea says Jeff Barber sounds like Carol Hospital, right? You're talking amongst yourselves, that's super. Now, we need to go to this. So, bang. So now I have to come out of here. Now, this. Yeah, so I've been going through my old documents, because I've been trying to find a piece on how the Magna Carta forbids England to be handed over to any foreign power. Okay? I've been unfortunately not been able to find that, and I have to say, I'm not an emotional guy. I really am not an emotional guy. But when I was reading some of the stuff I've read today, I were quite, it weren't nice, I'll tell you that now, and I hope I don't do the same tonight. But it was, because the immensity of what's actually going on, when you see it and feel it, it's, you know, what are you doing for your offspring? You know, you might claim, I've got children and I'm this. You're not. You're a coward. You're a coward because you don't actually care about your offspring's future. You don't. You're giving away what millions of people have died for, your ancestors, on these lands, to give us. And we're pissing it against the wall. You know, we're pissing it against the wall. And all these Johnny foreigners that run around giving it England this, England that. You are part of the empire that you hate. England isn't the empire. The empire is the East India companies. Yeah, that's what the empire is. Rome, the East India companies. Rome. Jesuits call themselves the company. Get it in your head. Stop being cowardice and start to give a shit about the future you're leaving for your offspring. You selfish, self-righteous people out there. Especially the baby boomers. And I can speak like this. I'm Generation X. You were my parents' generation. Absurd. You're the most absurd expression of life I've ever studied in history. And you need to take that responsibility on board. And when you do, you can change it and start to act. This is bad. What you know, you're pathetic. So this is basically a digress in relation to what's been going on in England, but it covers a lot of topics that, again, we need to remember because we forget this stuff. So the introduction is, during the last few years, we have been witnessing the shameful betrayal of all traditional British concepts by our leading politicians. To cap it all, the Prime Minister, Ellen Macmillan, has been making determined efforts to subjugate us to European bureaucrats and to break up the British world beyond recovery. So this were working, put together at the time of Ellen Macmillan. He said it is humiliating that these last few days it has fallen to a remarkable Frenchman, Charles de Gaulle, who is standing, according to his lights and greatness of France, to save us from our folly, and to point out that Britain is an insular and maritime nation with worldwide connections, differing fundamentally from the nations of Europe, and that we, as a nation, could not enter the common market except at the price of dishonour. Alright, so if you're a politician, a councillor, or any other two-bit tosser, you are in dishonour. Okay? Dishonour. Regardless of what you think of yourself, and regardless of what your handler tells you. In the following pages, an attempt has been made to indicate very briefly the basic factors in Britain's rise to greatness in the past. It is the gradual losing sight of these truths since the end of the 17th century, so that's the 1600s, which has produced the conditions leading to our present alarming decline. This has been written in the hope that it is still possible for the British people to wake up and make a last stand for the truth. We've got to, mate! Alright? A bibliography has been provided at the end of this booklet to enable that. And this was done January 29, 1963. Law and the Constitution. In the beginning, God gave mankind law, and we are told... Don't forget that, we're not going through that shit. Now then, Lord Chief Justice Cork wrote, the original laws of this land were composed of such elements as Brutus first selected from the ancient Greek and Trojan institutions. A later king, Dunwall or Malmutius, recodified the laws. He was called Donald the Bold as well. A later king, Dunwall or Malmutius, recodified the laws about 450 BC. And Cork, in his Origin of the Common Law of England, wrote that the Malmutius laws have been always regarded as the foundation and bulwark of British liberties. Because, of course, then we were British Isles, remember. That's what it used to be called, before that Albion. Under the laws of Brutus, every subject was as free as the king. The laws in force were the Sefrithio, or common rights, so that's obviously Welsh. So I've never learnt sheep shagging language, I've got to be honest. Or common rights. The usages of Britain would not be altered by any act of the Crown or National Convention. They were now considered the inalienable rights to every Briton, to which every Briton was born, and of which no human legislation could deprive him. One of these usages was, there are three things belonging to a man, from which no law can separate him: his wife, his children, and the instruments of his calling. For no law can unman a man or uncall a calling. Did you see, look at that? Children. Offspring. What's happening today? It's not so much that they're taking them off you. You're handing them over. Because you're born idle. You won't get off your ass. You're too coward to actually stand up for your own rights. Because you're not man. You're person. Among the laws as enacted by Malmutius is the following. Three things are indispensable to a true union of nations: sameness of laws, rights, and language. Later again, the laws were codified by King Alfred, who quotes almost verbatim from Moses. The law was again incorporated in Magna Carta, 1297, later in the Bill of Rights, 1689, and the Act of Settlement, 1701. Also, the Bill of Rights and Act of Settlement, which of course is William and Mary. They were always trying, these events were us, our ancestors, trying to pull back England, or what was British Isles, which was Scotland, was Wales, and the islands around, including Ireland. This very ancient system of law, for long known as the common law, has been retained throughout the ages by England alone. From a time centuries before Christ, the Jews have been losing it under the influence of the Talmud and of subjection to other peoples. The East eventually became subject to the Mohammedan law. The Roman civil law came to hold sway nearly everywhere in Europe, except Britain. The common law of England has, of course, been spread about parts of the world during recent centuries where Britain has held sway. A great difference between the civil law and the common law is that the civil law holds that every man and every nation is guilty until he has proved himself to be innocent, whereas the common law holds that every man and every nation is innocent until he has been proven to be guilty. I mean, no, that's what Napoleon were putting over Rome. It's all been about Rome, the empire. You know, Napoleonic Code, you are guilty. No, you're innocent. And if somebody makes a claim, they better prove that they better evidence the claim and prove that you're guilty. The common law applies equally to all in the land, from the monarch to the lowest, and has the effect of conferring legal democracy on the people. It is essentially the most righteous system of law in the world, and it is, as has been stated by a number of eminent foreign jurists. The legal democracy based on our common law led to the evolution of our constitution, which throughout the ages until the last 100 years or so was as described by Blackstone in his commentaries on the laws of England. In all tyrannical governments, the supreme magistrate, or the right both of mankind, the right both of making and of enforcing laws, is vested in one and the same man, or one and the same body of men. And whenever these powers are united together, there can be no public liberty. The magistrate may enact tyrannical laws and execute them in a tyrannical manner, since he is possessed in quality of dispenser of justice, with all the power which he as legislator thinks proper to give himself. But where the legislative and executive authority are in distinct hands, the former will take care not to entrust to the latter with so large a power as may tend to the subversion of its own independence, and therewith of the liberty of the subject. With us, therefore, in England, this supreme power is divided into two branches: the legislative, to wit, the Parliament, consisting of the King, Lords and Commons, and the other, the executive, consisting of the King alone. Under this system, it was the duty of the King to command his Privy Council, the men whom he thought most fitted to enable him to govern the country. If a member of the House of Commons was appointed to the government, he had to resign his seat in the House. The House of Lords, besides being a Senate, was the Supreme Court of common law in the country. The House of Commons was composed of men elected by the constituencies to represent them in Parliament. Did you hear that, MPs? The House of Commons was composed of men elected by the constituencies to represent them in Parliament. Okay? That's not happening, is it? There were no political parties, and therefore all members of the Commons were independent. Their duty was to represent their constituents and to act in accordance with their conscience. As there were no party organisations, the constituencies were free to choose the men they thought best for the job. There was freedom of election. And as I've said before, consider it in this way: one page of rules, 22 in number. The Crown, or the inner city, tore it in half, 11 rules on each, give half to the left and half to the right. So each have half of the rules required to run a nation. And what have they done? They've got you all believing one side or another because you're stupid. That's party politics, people. The duty of the members of the Commons was to keep vigilant watch to see that none of the King's ministers in conducting the government did anything that would infringe the liberty of the subject. Their power of sanction lay in the fact that they controlled the purse and could impeach any minister before the House of Lords, if they thought such a course to be necessary in the interest of good government. The idea was that the three parts of Parliament, Monarch, Lords and Commons, were of equal standing, and the system worked best when they worked amicably in equality. Of course, the Parliament today pretends it's sovereign. You ain't sovereign shit. You ain't sovereign nothing. The only sovereign role here is the office of monarch. And we give it our sovereignty. We are the crown. We are the monarch. But the monarch has to be acting in accordance with the constitution. Have they done that? No. Is Big Ears going to do that? No. Trouble was apt to arise if the balance got disturbed by one of the parts getting or trying to get too powerful at the expense of the others. Tony Blair. Gordon Brown. Because remember, Gordon Brown is the supreme communist. Tony Blair was just the frontman Mandy. Yeah, and their job from the get-go was to remove the House of Lords of Englishmen. Remove the House of Lords of the power of the bishops of the Church of England. That's what they did. But we've had some interesting manoeuvres in the last couple of weeks, which we'll have a look after. So I'm starting to think we might have a bit of hope. They've blocked the government's wish to be able to arrest you without suspicion. They've blocked this idea that they can arrest protesters. And they've created a mechanism within this bill for a digital currency to ensure there's also a mechanism for cash. That is a great thing. Now, let me just put this to you, because I've been thinking about this week. Why would they want the two systems? Well, one, because the elite want it, but more importantly, what they're actually doing now is moving everybody into a new trust. We call it the Noahide. Right? So they're moving you off the old trusts, the original one being Genesis 1, and that trust is between the gods, the Elohim, and man. And that trust is built from within, exactly what Jesus came to remind you of. Yeah? And they've created these secondary trusts with person, haven't they? So they've got us all to that, now they're moving us into another trust, the Noahide. Now, they can only do that if you're on person. Get this, because this is what I'm going to run by you, because this is what I think they're doing. If you've taken the DNA altering juice, your DNA is now owned by the companies that patented this system. You don't have a choice anymore. You are marked by the beast. They can force you into this digital currency. You have no say in it anymore because you belong. Your biological system, your avatar, belongs to them. Right? That's what you've done. It's what you've done to your offspring because you were terrified little creatures. Okay? Ignorance is not a good idea, folks. This ancient and historic constitution... Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I missed some. Trouble was apt to arise if the balance got disturbed by one of the parts getting or trying to get too powerful at the expense of the others. The great strength of the Tudors, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, lay in the fact that they understood the constitution and knew the limits to their power. Now that's interesting. I mean, you know, you can study so many different paths of history and be hoodwinked. It's odd, isn't it? Let's be honest. This ancient and historic constitution, based on the principles of English legal democracy under the common laws, proved to be the finest and most enduring system of government in the civilised world. And under it, every Englishman had freedom of action. How does that go with your lockdowns? You were told to stay in kennel. You have no idea what it means to be an Englishman. You stayed in kennel. The resulting achievements of the British at home and abroad were remarkable. This legal democracy rested on fundamental law, applied to the wide divergent social issues by the reasoned decisions of the lawyers in the courts of law, and the separation of the legislative and the executive authorities. The whole system rested on the consent of the people, and all its officials were responsible to the people through their elected representatives in the Commons. The civil law must now be described. Roman law was the great achievement of Roman lawyers applying the fundamental principles of the 12 tables to the problems of Roman social life. With the passing of Rome, its authority ended, but when rediscovered in the revival of learning, a call arose for the civil law to be adopted in place of the native laws of the various countries of Europe. So this is when the Babylons took it over. Being of a highly technical character, it could only be imposed by order of the ruler, or, as in England, used as a source of legal reasoning and brought into native law as thought desirable. For its authority, it did not claim that it was based on fundamental legal principles, but that it rested on the will of the ruler, who could alter it as he thought fit. So this is this Pope. He's the ruler. Lex Regia. Scotland is under this system, right? If you allow Charles to become King of Scotland forsake England, the British Isles are 100% under law. Right? And all these immigrants, whatever their ideas, the feelings and the garbage, will be backed by this coming King of Scotland. Get that in your minds, people. It will be done because you will have consented because you were too busy watching telly. Being of highly technical character, it could only be imposed by order of the ruler, or as in England, users have done that, as he thought fit. This doctrine became known as the Lex Regia and is described in the Institutes of Justinian as follows. That which seems good to the emperor has all the force of law. For the people by the Lex Regia, which is passed to confer on him his power, makes over to him their whole power and authority. Therefore, whatever the emperor ordains by rescript or decides in a judging or cause or lays down by edict is unquestionably the law. What's the Pope just done? Shifted all assets back into his bank. The ultimate treasury. This idea of will and caprice is the sole source of law. Gave birth to the idea that rulers derive their absolute authority from God alone. Which God? Are you Genesis 1? Because it's God's. Unless you're stupid and you don't know English grammar and you want to ignore that fact. And you are stupid if you're going to ignore that fact, Genesis 1, that it isn't the same God as in the garden. You really are retarded. And I don't care how long you've been studying this garbage. If you haven't seen that, you're not man. You are a person. Simple as. This idea of rulers derive their absolute authority from God alone and not from the people. So can you see? England's about the people. America is about the people. Australia was about the people. New Zealand was about the people. Canada was about the people. That's where we spread this stuff. Everywhere else is subservient to this. The garden god. Outside England, law ceased to be the subject for lawyers, who became mere civil servants applying the will of the ruler, and instead it became a subject for academic speculation on constitutional and legal principles in the universities. Under these theoretical conditions, all sorts of ideas of political democracy took root and led to the ecclesiastical and political movements and revolutions of Western civilization, which were aimed at the revocation of the Lex Regia, but failed, and that the result was merely to substitute the will of the people in place of the will of the ruler. Führer, Caesar! i.e., one source of lawlessness for another. The effect of the adoption of the Roman Civil Code is the total destruction of all constitutional law and the subversion of all constitutional institutions. This was clearly shown in the case of Scotland, which had been for centuries a common law country, with legal ideas and institutions similar to those of England. The Declaration of Arbroath had been the Magna Carta of Scotland, but in 1370 the Scottish Parliament gave up its power to an independent committee, which became the College of Justice and which adopted the civil law in Scotland, although it was never authorised by the Scottish Parliament. So even in Scotland, they fudged it. The result was that the Scottish Parliament became a mere rubber stamp for the use of the King of Scotland and for any ruling factions that arose. The King became a legislative sovereign ruler, the source of all law. This is why there is so much trouble when the Stuarts mounted the English throne. They had been brought up in a constitution that was diametrically opposed to that of England and failed to adapt themselves to it. The English opposition to the civil law ideas has been on record from as long as 700 years ago in the writings of Bracton and his successors. 500 years ago, Fortescue in his De Laudibus Legum Anglia, see look, I'm even nearly fluent in Latin, made the contrast between common law and civil law kingships when he wrote, "For the King of England is not able to change the laws of his kingdom at his pleasure, for he rules his people with the power not only regal but also political. If his power over them were only regal, then he might change the laws of his realm and charge his subject with taxes and other burdens without their consent, And such is the domination that the civil laws claim when they state the prince's pleasure has the force of law. But the case is far otherwise with a king ruling his people politically. He can neither change the law without the consent of his subjects, nor yet charge them with impositions against their will. Wherefore his people fairly and freely enjoy and occupy their own goods, being ruled by such laws as they themselves desire. Can you see? The shit, the cabinet, the parliament, the crown today is Rome. The Rothschilds are Rome. Babylon. They might call themselves Jews, but they certainly aren't. And that's for Jews to reckon with. After nearly a century of trouble with the Stuarts and with Cromwell, the English Constitution was again reaffirmed in the Act of Settlement and Bill of Rights. The Act of Settlement had the following peroration. Whereas the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof, and all the kings and queens who shall ascend the throne of this realm ought to administer the government of the same according to the said laws, and all the officers and ministers ought to serve them respectively according to the same. The said Lords spiritual and temporal and commons do therefore humbly pray, that the laws and statutes of this realm for securing the established religion and the rights and liberties of the people thereof, and all other laws and statutes of the same now in force, may be ratified and confirmed, and the same are by His Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the said Lords, spiritual and temporal, and commons, and by authority of the same, ratified and confirmed accordingly. The principles thus enacted remain to this day the fundamental law of our Constitution. But after that we began to run into further trouble. Corruption set in as a result of apolitical parties beginning to emerge. So this is your Whigs. And your original Conservatives were actually called Tories. They were Catholic bandits. That's Tory is actually meant Catholic bandit. So even the Catholics weren't really with Rome back then. They're certainly not with it now, but they weren't even back then. Everybody were on England. So A, political parties coming to emerge. B, of the union with Scotland, a civil law country. C, and of having more kings brought up with the civil law ideas. The union with Scotland had unfortunate results in that the House of Lords now had to deal with the appeals from the courts of session, and it knew nothing about the civil law. The members began to lose interest in their legal duties through being unable to understand the new jurisprudence, about which English judges were of little help. At the same time, a rapid increase in the membership of the House began as a result of party political activities, and this led to a great decrease on the part of the membership in their traditional pride, in their duty to understand and judge in accordance with the common law. Eventually, by the Judicature Act of 1870, our Supreme Court of Common Law was virtually suppressed. The Act of Settlement contained the following vitally important clause relating to the purity of the representative principle. No person who has an office or a place of profit under the King or receives a pension from the Crown shall be capable of serving as a member of the House of Commons. And now they've got all the little players in there, haven't they? And like I said, you've got to think, 1850 to 1900, that was a reset. So all that this they've got in on these acts, these garbage, this piss, has been in readiness for the reset that they set up then. But the new interests achieving power by means of constitutional corruption managed to get the above clause amended so as to allow members of the House of Commons to retain their seats while holding office in government and administration, under conditions by which the intention of the clause was virtually defeated. And the House of Commons became open to the influence of public patronage and the management of its members. Instead of being a control on those who exercise national authority, it became subservient to them. George III had been brought up under the influence of his mother, who was a German princess from a civil law principality. She also took care to surround him with tutors and advisors holding similar conceptions of kingship. The result was that Scotsmen played a leading part in his education and in his early administrations, notably William Murray as Solicitor General and later as Lord Chief Justice of England under the title of Lord Mansfield. So this is your Whigs. Yeah, this is your Whig lot. Now Mansfield, though an English judge, was a Roman lawyer. seeing the foundation of jurisprudence to be the Roman civil law and not appreciating the merits of the common law or the love of the public liberty displayed by many of its maxims. By means of the power given him by patronage, George III found himself able to achieve a personal rule with the support of the Commons as complete as Charles I had tried to establish in opposition to the House. So George III achieved what Charles I didn't. Under Lord Mansfield, the entirely new conception was introduced that any absolute passive obedience was due to Parliament, which was not in any way be questioned, much less resisted, by the people. He insisted that when the supreme power abdicates, the government is dissolved, and therefore that every means of coercion is justified to enforce authority. As a result of these ideas, Mansfield was largely responsible for the revolt of the American colonies and other troubles. Opposition to Mansfield's ideas was strongly expressed by men like Edmund Burke and William Pitt, Earl of Chatham. But in spite of this, we now have, for all practical purposes, a civil law set up of government by the Prime Minister, who usurped the royal prerogative power of patronage. This unconstitutional, and look what we've got in now, a Hindu ninja, Zelensky mate, a complete tosser, who doesn't wear a seatbelt when he's in a car, because he's better than you. This unconstitutional state of affairs has been attained by the development of the party system and of what are known as constitutional conventions, although they are, in fact, unconstitutional and opposed to the fundamental law of the land. Now, they're talking about Liz Truss coming back. And now, you've got to remember, the shenanigans with Charles, when they proclaimed him claiming all this bullshit, was done under Truss. My guess is, if the Hindu ninja's going, it's because they want Truss back in when he doesn't take the coronation oath. That would be my suggestion, so keep your eyes on that. This unconstitutional state of affairs has been attained by the development of the party system and of what are known as constitutional conventions, although they are in fact unconstitutional and opposed to the fundamental law of the land. It is interesting to note that when the American colonies obtained their independence, they introduced a written constitution based on the common law of England, with the president performing more or less the functions of the king, which functions the king should perform in our constitution. The result is that they have been able to keep their political parties under legal control, or not anymore, and their legal democracy has been able to confine and control the will as expressed by political democracy. So Trump, all these tossers, because Trump's King Cyrus, remember, all working for Rome, civil. They're not interested in they're not interested in the Constitution in America. They're not interested in the Constitution here. They're full of shit. They're puppets. What we now call parliamentary government is really party government, and the fundamental difference between it and the Old English and present American systems is that by the party system, the supreme executive authority is appointed by the legislature. Why can't I say that word? Legislature. From among its own members, i.e. the legislative and executive functions have been combined in one body. The cabinet. Get it? The cabinet! That's where the power is. So it doesn't matter which bunch of tossers are in, whether it's Corbyn or whether it's this dick, it's the cabinet that's the power. All the rest of them are just hanger-ons, told what to do because of the whip system. Yeah? The cabinet. Understand what the cabinet is. And the Privy Council dictates to it. Now you've got, well, you're not going to have a king in, but he's still going to be dictated to the Privy Council, therefore he's going to be out of charge in the Aggie Squeezer's land, but running the cabinet. Well, of course, Rothschild's going to be running the cabinet, he's just a puppet. Whereas under the latter systems, the supreme executive appointments are made by the legal head of the state from outside the members of the legislature. The Americans have retained rule by law, which we have abandoned in favour of rule by party. Well, the Americans are now in the same position. The conventions referred to above are merely the rules the party system has adopted to enable it to exercise power outside the constitutional law. Now, you can see that in America when you look at the way that the Republicans and the Democrats are just taking the piss out of each other, and everybody's bedaddles like it because they still think one or the other's alright. The tossers. You've got the same situation now. You've got party rule, cabinet, Rome. Trump is an arsehole. He's not what you think he is. As Sir Ivor Jennings writes in his Law and Constitution, most of the conventions relate to the operation of the party system, which is merely an aspect of cabinet government. The principles governing the workings of that system have never been formally recognised by Parliament or the courts. So far as the courts are concerned, they developed too late. The principles of constitutional law established by the courts recognise the constitution of the Revolution settlement. Institutions and practices which have grown up since that time have not received formal recognition by the courts, and the rules relating to them are not part of the common law. Accordingly, the rules relating to the foundation and operation of the cabinet, the relations between the Prime Minister and other ministers, between the government and the opposition, and many more are not in legislation, nor in the common law, nor in the law and the custom of Parliament. The party system is composed of private organisations under no legal or public control, and by means of the conventions it has destroyed all constitutional restraints. There is nothing democratic about it. What we really have now is party dictatorship. Referring to the nature of the character of party government, Burke, in his vindication of natural society, wrote, "The great instrument of all these changes, and what infuses a peculiar venom into all of them, is party. It is of no consequence what the principles of any party or what the pretensions are. The spirit which actuates all parties is the same, the spirit of ambition, of self-interest, of oppression and treachery." So while you're holding up all these MPs as something special, you dipsticks, they're not. They are like, so I picked up something earlier in the week where it's what's happening with the police is they're actually purposefully recruiting people that have certain psychopathic tendencies. And it's the same with politicians. And it's the same with all these people that are running the food banks. And that psychopathy is based in satanic Christianity. Yeah? This happy clappy stuff. Alpha. So what they've done basically now, while you're all pissing around watching telly, is handed our entire system to people with particular psychopathic traits. And those are backed by their own idea of satanic religion. But of course they think, it's Jesus. No. Okay? That's what they've done. This is why your coppers are thick. This is why your coppers now, if you say, blah, 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 they have to look on their phone a friend. Because they haven't got a fucking clue what law is. They don't even know the sorts of statutes that they claim to be enforcing. Because they're psychopaths. Not perhaps full-blown, but they have the traits. Okay? Get that in your mind. That's what you're dealing with these people. Yeah? They're thick. They're the underclass of our societies that they're pulling into these systems. And then they're going full psychopathy with these immigrants that they're pulling in, that they intend to put up as UN roadblocks and such for the 15-minute cities. Where are we? I forgot where I am. The great incident of all these changes and what infuses a peculiar venom into them is what I've done that. Such men as Lord Brougham, John Stuart Mill and Lord Bryce in England and Washington and John Adams in America also gave warnings against the party system. The parties form an effective barrier between the people and the government. Under the whip system, the Member of Parliament, originally member petitioner, owes allegiance to the party and not to the people. So you're voting in it. So this is what I mean about psychopathic. They're standing up and going to you, I love you, I'll do exactly what you want because I'm here for you and your concerns. And you go, I believe you because you're lovely. And as soon as they get in, it's fuck you. We're going to do what they're liars. By their very nature, they are liars. And I have said I've been in local politics. It's like entering childcare. They are infantile, but evil they will do. There's nothing they won't do to get their way and to stop you undermining them. They are evil infants, all of them. And that's all you. Any politician you've got, he went to your door, talked bollocks, reckoned he were concerned about your concerns. Oh no. He owes allegiance to the party and not the people. But they need your vote. Because if you stop voting this shit in, this ends. You're making this happen. Do you understand that if you're voting? I voted once for Thatcher when I turned 18. And then she announced Channel Tunnel. That were it. Never again have I took any part in this bullshit. I'm not giving any of these tossers 1 ounce of my energy to do what they do. The system crushes personal independence, a totalitarian, not a democratic feature. It has led to the elimination of independent MPs and the dominance of the government over the Commons. Party rivalry is no guarantee of protection of our rights and liberties, as the parties will always unite to keep out independence. So that's where we need to go, folks. Independence. And in defence of the powers and prerogatives which they have stolen from the people. In order to usurp the legal supremacy of Parliament, the first step is to destroy the freedom of election. Which they do, they select them. Everybody that runs for Parliament is being selected by a party. Because they've got psychopathic traits. And the police with psychopathic traits will back them. They're all, what would you call it? They're in the same asylum. And it's not the wise asylum. Because I wouldn't let them in. In order to usurp legal supremacy of Parliament, the first step is to destroy the freedom of election, which besides the secret ballot requires freedom of nomination and freedom of the elected representative from all influences of fear or favour, punishment or patronage. Although these freedoms are an essential part of our Constitution and are incorporated in the Bill of Rights, they have been eliminated by the party system. The idea of making candidates for election to Parliament put down a forfeitable deposit is one of the tricks designed to impede freedom of election by discouraging anyone other than party-sponsored candidates. Well, if that's not a rag to me, I don't know what is. From standing for election. Ooh, they've just thrown me a red rag here. I could end up doing what Cromwell did at some point now. I don't know. Anyway, of course I'm not. A parliament cannot be true and legal unless elected under conditions of proper freedom. What we now have is a modern form of livery and maintenance and an abuse of the legal procedure of the High Court of Parliament, besides which abuses like packing a jury are insignificant. The monarchy is the centre of our whole constitutional system because in the monarch is vested the sovereignty of the British people, and it is from this sovereignty that all legal authority is derived. By law, the sovereignty is in the Crown and cannot be delegated. And what's Big Ears doing? Yeah, he's not a monarch. He could never be a monarch as long as there's an hole in his ass. It's impossible. It can only be, but he can in Haggis. He can go and be a king of Haggis. No offence to you Scots, but your system's shit. Which is why I've got Jimmy Cranky running around, calling your names. It can only be effected by an Act of Parliament. Under the law, the monarch has only one personal function, that of being the controller of public patronage, and the grant of office and honour. The appointment to executive office was only limited by the need to appoint a person who would command the confidence of the House of Commons. But with the membership of the House of Commons under party discipline and control, it was only necessary for the party managers to inform the King that no confidence will be shown in anyone not acceptable to the majority party. And the personal and more significant prerogative of the Crown of appointment to public office immediately passed to the party managers, and this without any Act of Parliament having been passed. The Crown is now in the position, purely by legal party rules, of having to treat as a command the very humble advice ministers choose to give them 3 trustees people. Yeah, the Hindu ninja, Jeremy Hunt and Reid. Alright, this is where the power's in. But once he's up in Scotland, because he's Duke of Lancaster and telling the Privy Council and the Cabinet and Reid what to do, they've basically hijacked. What they're about to do is hijack England, but remove it from from us. This is how serious this is, people. And if you think that's not you, no matter what you do, you don't give a shit about your offspring's future. You never have, but you've just never recognised it. By the repeal of the clause of the Act of Settlement prohibiting members of the Commons from holding office and the usurpation of the royal prerogative, the party managers became free to nominate themselves to the highest offices, so that by party action in the Commons, the sovereignty of the English monarchy, and therefore of the English people, and the supremacy of English law has been usurped and destroyed. As Sir Louis Namier said in 1952, the Prime Minister replaced the Sovereign as actual head of the executive, when the choice of the Prime Minister no longer lay with the Sovereign. The Sovereign lost the choice when strongly organised disciplined parties came into existence, and party discipline depends primarily on the degree to which the member depends on the party for his seat. This is why Elizabeth and her dad fudged the coronation oath. For all practical purposes, we now have a republic, so she weren't fit for purpose. Because if she'd have been a true monarch, she'd have fought this. If her father had been a true monarch, he'd have fought this. Her son couldn't fight it if he tried. For all practical purposes, we now have a republic with only the trappings of a monarchy, and the whole process has been carried out in complete contempt of the ancient law of the land. The experience of Cromwell and the Protectorate showed the central truth that our constitutional monarchy, in its sovereign capacity, was the guardian of the rights and liberties of all Englishmen and their free parliamentary institutions. Are you listening, Protestants? I mean, you still hold that prick up in high regard. It's because you didn't study it. You've not studied it. You were told what it meant. You were told what it meant by Uncle Freemason, Uncle Jesuit. Now, Prime Ministers having usurped the royal prerogative, we have become, for all practical purposes, a nation of serfs. Yes, you are. You're a person. Look what they've just done to you. Or, look what you've just done to yourself, because you are actually a serf in your own mind. We have seen how the monarchy and people, as represented in the Commons, have become eliminated from the Constitution. We have also seen earlier how the House of Lords ceased, for all practical purposes, to be our Supreme Court of Common Law. And this was probably one of the biggest factors leading to the present corruption of the Constitution and the reception of the alien jurisprudence, which made the corruption possible. But as one of the institutions of Parliament, the House of Lords could have been a barrier to the usurpation of government by private political organisations. But when the royal prerogative is the fountain of honour, came under the control of the party managers, it was used for party ends, to get representation in the Lords and to raise money for party funds by the sale of honours, thus bringing discredit on the House and destroying its constitutional power. The predominantly hereditary character of the Lords arose from the party actions of creating so many peers. The threat of an unlimited creation of peers was used to force through the Parliament Act in 1911, thus destroying the coordinate independence of the Lords. The party usurpation of the parliamentary, which is why the only people in the Lords since 1911 that could stop this shit was the bishops. It was the bishops. You know, you all hate your own religion because you don't understand it. Because the preachers of it weren't of the tradition. They were the idiots of alpha kind of mentality, those with the psychopathic traits. And you believed them. Because you couldn't be asked to study it yourself. The threat of an unlimited creation of peers was used to force through the Parliament Act in 1911, thus destroying the coordinate independence of the Lords. There we go. But it can be brought back. It's the power's in us. The power is invested in us, the people. And it only takes 5 to 8%. That's all it takes of people working in unison. We don't need all the fruit bats on side. You know? The party usurpation of our parliamentary institutions is now complete. The sole duty of Parliament consisting of monarch, lords and commons being to approve the Commons of the Cabinet, acting under what has now become, for all practical purposes, the dictatorship of the Prime Minister, and to give a legal form to these commands. What have we got in as a Prime Minister here? Now, a British Raj entity. Truss we had. What's that critter? Boris, the blonde bombshell. And we've just had idiot after idiot after idiot. I mean, John Smith, maybe he were alright. Errol Wilson, maybe he were alright. But the rest of them, you know, the last vestiges of anything good coming out of Labour was Sir Robin Cook. That's the last man, male, that the Labour Party had. Because even some of the other grandees that spoke a lot, I forgot their names, they didn't go far enough to, they were cowards. They were cowards. Robin Cook were no coward, because when he saw the light, he acted, and they killed him for it. They killed him for it. The party usurpation by Parliament, the sole duty of Parliament consists of the monarch, lords and commons being to approve the commands of the Cabinet, acting under what has now become, for all practical purposes, the dictatorship of the Prime Minister, to give a legal form to these commands. The party system has the inevitable effect of producing a partisan as opposed to a national outlook. It divides the nation, keeping it in a sort of civil war state, while the left and right, same, two sides of the same coin, and they're both being flicked by the banker. The party system has the inevitable effect of producing partisan as opposed to a national outlook. It divides the nation, keeping it in a sort of civil war state, while the attention of everyone is concentrated on this suicidal pastime. The satanically inspired forces of evil are free to get on with robbing the nation of everything of value that it possesses, which is why it's putting psychopaths in everything. So if you're a copper, you're excited, know that you've got psychopathic traits. If you're an MP, know you're where you are because you've got psychopathic traits. If you're a councillor, know where you are because you're an idiot. That's how it works, folks. That's Satanism. Walter Paley, in his Political and Moral Philosophy, published in 1782, wrote, "By the constitution of a country is meant so much of its law as relates to the designation and form of the legislature, the rights and functions of several parts of the legislative body, and constructions, offices and jurisdictions of courts of justice. The constitution is one principal division, section or title of code, of public laws, distinguished from the rest only by the superior importance of the subject of which it treats. Therefore, the terms constitutional and unconstitutional mean legal and illegal. The distinction and ideas which these terms denote are found in the same authority with the law of the land on any other subject, and to be ascertained by the same inquiries. In England, the system of public jurisprudence is made up of acts of Parliament, of decisions of courts of law, and of immemorial usages. Consequently, these are the principles of which the English Constitution consists. The sources from all our knowledge of its nature and limitations are to be deduced, and the authorities to which all appeal ought to be made, and by which every constitutional doubt and question can alone be decided. The Cabinet is not and never has been part of our legal constitution. From the beginning, it has been a malevolent growth which has destroyed the most vital principle in our constitutional system, that of ministerial responsibility to Parliament. Having adopted secrecy and collective action so that ministers cannot now be impeached by the Commons, as the Commons cannot find out for what any individual minister is responsible. And because you break the system, you lose the whip. Thus we who pride ourselves on democracy have allowed ourselves to reach the stage of being despotically governed by a secret council, sworn to silence, for which there is no basis in English law. The Cabinet, the Privy Council, the inner city of London, the Holy See. There is now nothing to safeguard the national interests and our national destinies bound to party appointments made for party ends, regardless of the suitability of the men for the post to which they are appointed. Besides being unconstitutional, the system is criminally insane. Under irresponsible and unsuitable ministers, we naturally get an immense army of government officials who exercise despotic power in all sorts of ways and who are exempt from any public and personal responsibility to Parliament. There is no room for statesmanship or integrity. Everything is reduced to the sordid immediate consideration of deluding the public into voting as required by the respective parties in order to retain or obtain the sweets of office. The party system denies the existence of fundamental law, and this modern denial is associated with John Austin, who repudiated English common law ideas and turned with respect to the Roman civil law. He got his ideas in Germany, when the philosophy of totalitarian dictatorship was being incubated. Popular institutions such as our Parliament can only retain their character if they are subject to a fundamental law, which holds them true to their purpose, and, if the law is destroyed, there is nothing to prevent them being corrupted into becoming the instruments of despotism, instead of being the guardians of law, as was clearly shown by the experience of Scotland, mentioned earlier. Austin and Dicey supported the idea that the sovereignty of Parliament is, from the legal aspect under the British Constitution, absolute to the extent that it could even ignore the law of nature, although that law was a common feature of all civilised legal systems, and although, for example, the Treaty of Union between England and Scotland gives no hint of an absolute sovereign legislature, but throughout conveys the idea of a supreme Parliament bound by fundamental law. What the modern idea that there is no fundamental law means in constitutional matters is made quite clear by Professor Goff when he states, "It was with the Benthamite principle of utility, although this itself was only natural law in a new form, accompanied by the introduction of parliamentary reform, that modernity really began to make itself felt. Then at last the relics of the idea of fundamental law gave way before the realisation that there was nothing to hinder the possessors of power from using it to promote their own interests, and that how to do so most successfully is the art of politics. Obviously, no constitutional system of value can survive on these principles. Dicey, when defining parliamentary sovereignty, was forced to do so in terms of constitutional and fundamental law. Parliament has no legal authority whatsoever unless it is conforming to law. We have a legal constitution based on the fundamental common law of England, laid down as described by Walter Paley, above but smothered by the unwritten conventions. Dicey confused the issue. In law, our constitution is as rigid as the American, with its written codified constitution. The statutory rules and orders now flooding our legal system have no validity, being only accepted as law in English conformity with the Austinian doctrine as stated by C.H.S. Firefoot in his English law and its background. A sinister development has been the setting up of independent courts of law, known as the administration courts. That's all these tossers that you're getting shoved to, star courts, magistrates, JPs. Again, people chosen because they have psychopathic traits, which have developed a procedure incompatible with English legal procedure. They are based on civil law and not on common law principles, and are designed to dodge the Statute of Northampton, in which it is enacted that justice and right should be done, regardless of the command of the government. They have no day in court, no jury, no decision is governed by precedent. The judges are civil servants, and the decisions given are not those of the hearing judges. The judgments are not reasoned. Their purpose is to enforce the will of the rulers, regardless of justice and right or the consent of the people. It is now firmly established in our modern system that even in peacetime, Britons have no fundamental or constitutional rights. Because you're person, people. It doesn't mean you can't have it. You just have to understand that the reason that they've trapped you with this is because your ID is person. That birth certificate is ID or discharge. And you're choosing on ignorance ID. Which is why these psychopathic police demand ID. Why the courts demand ID. Are you getting it? There's always a remedy, people. And if you've been watching my stuff for the last couple of years, there we go. I've been giving you the remedy. But obviously, you have to understand it. You can't just have it given to you on a plate. You have to fully embrace this data and then act with it in order you come out of this shit. It is now firmly established in our modern system that even in peacetime, Britons have no fundamental or constitutional rights, such as were guaranteed forever by our fundamental law contained in Magna Carta and expressed in the Petition of Rights 1628 in the following terms: that all and singular the rights and liberties asserted and claimed in the said declaration are the true, ancient and indubitable rights and liberties of the people of this kingdom. One example of loss of rights is that of the right of appeal to the sovereign. If anyone now writes appealing to the Queen in connection with what is thought to be unjust treatment received at the hands of government department, all that happens is that the bureaucracy surrounding the Queen, in accordance with the modern convention, passes the appeal to the department in question, where it is put in a pigeonhole. The Queen hears nothing about it, and the appellant is beating his head against a brick wall. The remarkable split-mindedness of our modern legal authorities is well illustrated by the fact that Sir Hartley, now Lord Shawcross, had to appeal to common law principles in order to try to make a case against the Germans during the shocking mockery of justice in the war crimes trials at Nuremberg, because it was not feasible to do so under civil law principles. But at the same time, when feeling it to be necessary to praise at home the principles he had been condemning as criminal at Nuremberg, he could say to an English audience, as reported in the Times, May the 13th, 1946, Parliament is sovereign. It can make any laws. It can't make any laws. It could ordain that all blue-eyed babies should be destroyed at birth, but it has been recognised that it is no good passing laws unless you can be reasonably sure that in the eventualities which they contemplate, those laws will be supported and can be enforced. This is why they've got psychopathic traits in the executive, the police, the judiciary. Yeah? Because they are enforcing it. Because they're ignorant. And they don't know their ass from their elbow. But you're paying them a salary. That's enough to keep them there. The above is pure civil law and amounts to the fact that in the opinion of such lawyers, the Cabinet has now the legal power to do anything, not being bound by any considerations of natural or fundamental law. This is utter lawlessness and a fatal corruption in the soul of the British people. As Burke said, the whole point about the English Constitution as it developed under law over the ages was that it was designed to produce good governors, whereas other constitutions were satisfied with trying to produce good subjects. It is clear that if you have good governors, you have a very good chance of having good subjects. And it should now be obvious, judging by what has happened in Britain since the last war, that if you have bad governors, you soon get corrupt subjects. It is hoped that enough has been said above to show that we now have a government based on a system entirely contrary to the ancient constitution and fundamental law of the land, and completely contrary to the dictates of common sense, in that it cannot fail to do other than result in the greatest possible corruption of the character of the people and the destruction of all proper national interests. If we had gone into the common market, we would have been subjected to men with a different background, men with ideas of law and liberty of the subject entirely opposed to those for which we have stood and fought throughout the ages. The legal democracy which we used to have would have been something beyond their ken, and we would have become slaves of whoever was wielding power from behind the scenes. Since Britain's entry into the then EEC in 1973, all this has come to pass. And there you go. There you go. That's what made Blighty amazing and fantastic, just like me. Yeah. So I've got other data here as well. But obviously, we only have so much time before you're all falling asleep. I will make these other documents available under this video. And also what I wanted to look at was just the importance of court of record, its import and the commentaries on it. Again, I will make that available. Oh, you're joking. You couldn't see any of that, could you? Oh no, you could, couldn't you? Thank God for that. I thought you couldn't see that then, my God. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I didn't ruin that by being far too excitable and what have you, because of course there's no magic cabbage in this. I will have a look at what you guys are saying before we tottle off, but I hope that shows you what all your ancestors died for, built, and you've thrown it away. Not just you, your mums and dads, your grandmas and granddads, your great-grandmas and granddads threw it away. Why? Because they don't know what it is to be man. Everybody's person. And thus subject to the will of the psychopaths. So, where are we? Let's have a look. Andrea Hodgson says, hi, Bowen, Howley, Fairclough. Okay, you talking to yourselves, you guys. Alright. Bill of Rights, 1688, Article 3. I do declare that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state, or potentate have or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence in this land. Well done, Paul, for that. Well done for that, my friend, because that is England. And your mum and dad is stupid. Their mum and dad were stupid. But it doesn't mean you have to follow suit. We've got to mate people as a collective. We can't just keep pass-arsing around watching YouTube channels. It's not, you're going to take this away from the world. If America and England go, freedom has gone. You're under the Caesars again. And look at their armies. Look at what armies they're flooding in every country in Europe. Across America. That's the army of Rome. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you. Till the next time.
electronic engineering.